Don't blow a gasket, because we're going to talk about caskets. Find out what this story is all about. Coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at Graves Pools and Spas on Highway 544 in Socastee between the Intercoastal Waterway and South Carolina 31. We're focused on the after-death care industry, and we're visiting with Jim Bowdre. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning.
Thank you so much. I meant to say the territory manager with Batesville Casket Company. Am I correct?
Correct.
Territory manager with Batesville Casket Company, and of course someone who knows this area very well. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you. Been coming to this area for 28 years now.
Is that
traveling
right?
in? Mm-hmm.
Of course, both the Palmetto State, the Tar Heel State, and I guess the Virginia. I don't know what that is. What state is that? The Hokie State. The
Old Dominion is
Old Dominion.
Old Dominion.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. That's a popular way to call Virginia. A lot happening these days.
Right.
Of course, really exciting, and we want to highlight that tomorrow night, a big event. I know later today you're heading to Columbia, but a big event going on tomorrow night. If viewers need to get off to work now or get family off to school, we want to make sure they check out. What's the event going on tomorrow night?
Mercy Hospice and Palliative Care is having an annual fundraising event. That's their 6th year of doing this, where it's the Mardi Gras kind of festival, and it's a reverse raffle. The Band of Oz will be playing at Dynamite.
The Band of Oz, the Shamalama Ding Dong.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah.
So all you shaggers, come on out. You know, you'll have a good time. But it'll be heavy hors d'oeuvres, free wine and beer.
Right.
I guess it's all right to say that.
Yeah.
There'll be an opportunity for a $100 donation, tax-free donation, to a chance to win a reverse raffle for $5,000.
$5,000? Wait, did you say that? $5,000 just by making a donation to Mercy Hospice of $100?
And get Sister Connie Fahey to bless the ticket, because the ticket she blessed last year actually won.
Oh, come on.
I couldn't believe it.
Is that right?
I mean, excuse me, I can't believe it. Yeah. But it was unreal.
And she only blessed one ticket. And it was
right,
the winner
to my knowledge,
year.
that was
right.
And it actually won.
That's
I couldn't
amazing.
believe it.
Well, let's hope they gave the $5,000 back to the church back to Sister Fahey last year. How exciting!
Yeah, it was phenomenal. I mean, I couldn't believe it, because I was actually drawing the tickets out.
Oh, you're kidding! You were there with your beautiful bride, Carol.
Right.
And she is involved with Mercy Hospice.
Right. She's director of development for Mercy.
Great. The 347-5500 number, is that a good number for folks to call today?
Correct. You know, and ask for Carol Bowdre or anyone pertaining to the Mardi Gras event.
The Mardi Gras benefit bash up there. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be held where?
At Dynamite's, by the big Marines.
Up at Doc Holidays. Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. That's a great area up there. Real easy to find.
Yeah. Cindy Uliucci has helped Carol a lot in setting that up. In fact, Carol and Cindy went to high school together in Fayetteville.
Is that right?
So
in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Yeah, right on the border of our viewing area here.
Right.
Yeah. And of course, that is last year. It wasn't up there at Dynamite's last year. Was it a smaller venue, right?
Right. Down at Broadway at the beaches where
they've been having such big crowds there. They decided to move it to a bigger location. I think.
Right. So they could have a band,
right,
and so forth. So
the Band of Oz. That's tremendous.
Yeah, we were real excited, or Carol was, about being able to get that band and entertain, and they'll have heavy hors d'oeuvres, like I say, and it'll be a good evening.
Well, obviously, our real focus was to get you in to talk a little bit about the funeral home industry or the after-death. You mentioned the after-death care industry, obviously, but surely the opportunity. Mercy Hospice and palliative care ties into a great degree. Is that how Carol got involved with Mercy Hospice? Had she been following your career and obviously working with Batesville?
I wished I could take credit for her career, but she's been involved in nonprofits for over a decade. Back at home in Bennettsville, where our permanent home is.
Sure.
And she worked for PD Coalition. For the Helping Hands Hospice, they call it now, in Marlboro County.
Right.
She was in charge of fundraising for that, for a facility, an on-site facility.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then she did fundraising for the PD Coalition, which for abused mothers and
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, spouses,
Right.
children. They do a great, they have a great effort forth to help, you know, families in need and so forth.
Well, I
They
remember
do a
when
good job.
Carol was with us there at Ace Hardware up on 79th, and she mentioned that a number of folks in Bennettsville, or in y'all's home community, had seen her on the show, and Northland Cable up there. I know Fox TV is on Channel 7 up there in Bennettsville as well as a good over-the-air signal. Marlboro County's got a lot going on right now, and that's your permanent home.
Correct. Right. We moved there several years ago when my oldest daughter was skiing on a competitive level, and we bought a home on a lake so I could work out with her. And she did that for several years. Skied on the Clemson ski team. And
She was on the Clemson ski
Right.
team. Is that right? I can't imagine they even have a ski team. Wow.
yeah, they competed with several Southeast Conference or the
How
schools,
exciting.
you know,
Yeah.
throughout the.
Is she
There
still
was about 12 schools
competing?
No, she's a mother now, raising 2 children.
Is that
and
right?
a nurse.
She's the one at Waccamaw Community Hospital.
Correct.
You and Carol have how many girls?
3.
3 girls, Jim.
And,
Payback.
And we've
Yeah.
stopped counting.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. No mas. Yeah, yeah.
3.
Wow. How exciting, Jim.
So they keep
Where are
us
your other
busy.
2 girls?
The middle daughter, Holly, is in med school at in Columbia at
Right.
USC, and then my youngest of the 3 lives here at the beach.
Okay,
And
good.
is in the restaurant, pursuing a career in a restaurant. She attended Coastal Carolina, but
Right.
she's trying to learn the restaurant business, from serving to bartending, the whole deal. We're not sure what she'll do with it, but
Oh, yeah.
she's enjoying herself.
Take her
in a way.
time. We've got actually one of the professors from Coastal on tomorrow, Dr. Taylor DeMont, in the restaurant and tourism, resort tourism management program.
Right, that's the program. That's a very good program.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm looking forward to getting him in. And obviously, and I think he and you have something in common. He may not wear his ring as often as you do, but I believe he's a graduate of Virginia Tech as well. Your alma mater there.
Yeah, very good. I'm not sure. I don't remember that they were 13,000 students when I was there. Frank Beaver and I did share several classes together.
Is that right? Yeah, the football coach.
Right.
How exciting, Jim.
Yeah, we were acquaintances. I won't say we were close friends, but
Right, right.
anyway.
What got you, now, did you originally grow up in Virginia or in
Yeah,
Carolina?
on a dairy farm, a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week business.
Is that right? You worked in the family business?
Right, in the dairy business, and it was
Uh-huh.
a tough. It was. I determined. My mother was an educator, so I was determined to get an education, so I wouldn't have to work all the time on the farm.
I'm sure your
that
dad
prompted
didn't like
me
that.
to-
Yeah.
But anyway, so I did, after finishing school, taught high school math for 4 years, and we were under the block system, which I don't think many schools are still under, but there were 2-hour classes instead of 50-minute classes.
Huh.
And the whole school year was encompassed just a semester.
Is that
So
right?
by doubling up on the class hours, you would go a half a year and be done.
Oh, so you could work the dairy business, for instance?
Well, right, or whatever, because
Or
I was
whatever.
out. What you did is you taught 2 classes one semester, 3 the next.
Oh, excuse me. Of course, that's right. You're saying you were teaching then, but
Right.
for your students, that was good to be able to get out and do
Well, it was
something
early
else.
because I was used to getting up early back then anyway. But the schools would start because they would use the high schools would start even earlier because they'd use the same buses for the elementary schools.
No
It
way.
was a county where they were trying to pinch pennies, I guess, or conserve monetarily, which they did. And I loved the system because
Right.
I was out by 11 o'clock on one semester and one by the next, the following. So it gave me time to pursue other endeavors, and that's when I started actually helping a local funeral director there on his farm.
Is that right?
And then I got kind of amalgamated to working towards the funeral industry, and saw how giving and caring people who are associated with that industry are. and became interested in it. If you really like people, which you really have to like people to be in the funeral industry, because it requires a lot of dedication, and if you love people, you'll be real good in the industry. And most of the folks I know in the industry really like people, and that's why it's a good giving industry. And that's how I kind of gravitated towards that, and was in graduate school at the time to pursue being a principal, etc.
Right,
and
right.
Did a reversal and went to mortuary science school and became licensed and started working in the funeral business.
And you actually worked in one there in Virginia, or is that when you were?
Well,
I saw
Virginia,
at some point you
North Carolina.
segued into North Carolina.
Right.
Yeah, it was close to.
Because it was right on the Virginia line, and
Okay.
gentlemen owned two firms, across the line from each other. So I, became licensed in both states.
States,
and
yeah.
of course, most states, if you completing your mortuary science school,
Right.
you have the opportunity to take a national board, which I did, and you can become nationally board certified, which a lot of my customers are, and then that requires, or a lot of states will accept that. If you
Is
just
that right?
move to that state and establish residency, and you already have your 5 years experience, they'll automatically issue your
Is it
license.
5 years experience, Jim?
Right. Well,
the
that's
national,
that's
yeah.
if you're being transferred or are transferring to another state.
Right.
And you've already, that way, funeral director, mortician, professional funeral providers can move from one state to the other if they're nationally board certified and presume a career in that state.
That is fascinating.
So
So it was purely coincidental that you got into the industry. You
Right,
were
yes.
obviously teaching math in that program to become a principal, and then we're helping somebody out. That's fascinating. Now, of
Yeah,
course,
it's amazing.
being in education, those are folks who love people, whether they love children or otherwise. I mean,
Correct.
they have to love people to be educators or
Yeah.
principals, assumably.
Yeah, I had a high school math teacher that was I thought was a great teacher, and he just totally inspired me to do the same thing, and
Right.
that's why I pursued it. And then with my connection with my mother, but so that's
You talked about regulation. Not to cut you off, Jim, you're thinking about regulation. How is the industry regulated? Is it self-regulated, or is it state-regulated, federally
Federal.
regulated? Federal.
When I first got in the industry back in the early 70s, it basically was not regulated from the standpoint of pricing and that kind of thing.
Right.
Of course, our industry has been state regulated since the early 30s as far
Okay.
as licensing procedures,
Right.
that sort of thing. Kind of the same with making sure you've got a teaching certificate if you're going to teach, or you got a license to practice medicine or pharmacy or any of the other professions like that.
But why is it important that it's licensed and regulated like that, Jim?
Well, it's critical, I think, to keep the professionalism up in any organization.
Right.
Keep it, to have it, certain regulations in place, procedures that you have to follow to become licensed,
Sure.
et cetera. And then it's for your own personal protection as well, because obviously going to mortuary science college, you learn certain aspects of the industry that would protect you personally. For example, we would get, unfortunately, people who would die prematurely in an automobile accident, and you had, exposed parts of the human anatomy, and if you weren't trained to pick up on certain diseases that could have been prevalent,
Right.
so you could take necessary
Steps to
practices
protect
or
yourself.
steps to protect yourself.
Right.
So it was a 2-year, or is a 2-year course, and you have to be able to obviously learn about the pathogens that are out there and how
Oh,
they
yeah.
react to the human body, and be able to recognize those
Right.
and so forth.
Well, you've had a lot of schooling, Jim. 4 years at Virginia Tech, and then beginning graduate school in education, and then into 2 more years of schooling in mortuary school.
Yeah, some folks might say I can't make up my mind, but it's just such a caring industry, and
Yeah. It really is. Obviously,
that's why I gravitated towards it, and still still, in essence, I mean, I love the funeral business.
Oh, yeah.
Even though I'm not involved directly with waiting on families, I'm
Right.
on the wholesale side of it. So I get to, instead of working with maybe 80 or 90 families a year like I did in the funeral business, I
Right.
can work with 170, 180 professionals, you know,
Who are constantly waiting on
Right.
families.
Mhm.
Yes,
Right.
yes. Share with viewers about Batesville. Obviously, we've got highlighted here on the screen, territory manager with Batesville Casket Company.
Well,
What is Batesville?
Batesville is headquartered out of Batesville, Indiana. It's a 132-year-old company. It's been
Is
around
that
a long
right?
time.
Right.
They're the world's largest casket manufacturer.
The world's largest, not America's largest,
Right,
but the world. Wow.
Um,
Do you have? Does Batesville have a lot of clients around the world?
some in Russia, especially in the Ukraine area.
Right.
Australia,
Sure.
France.
But just on
some
volume,
European,
y'all are the
Austria-
largest. Yeah.
Right. Most of our largest percent of business obviously comes from the U.S. and North, or just North America, South America,
Sure.
Mexico, Canada.
Mhm.
We have a couple of plants in Canada, a couple of plants in Mexico.
And I think I saw in visiting the Batesville website that it's part of the Hillen brand, that brand that also makes Hill Rom.
Right, the world's largest hospital bed manufacturer.
Right, right.
And the main plants for Hill-Rom are in Batesville, Indiana. We do have a plant in Charleston, South Carolina, that makes the little critical care Clinitron bed for severely burned, traumatized patients. And it kind of keeps a patient suspended so they can heal underneath without having
Wow.
very unique, or we had to fight long and hard to get the patent for that.
Oh, I bet, I bet, Jim.
It cost
Yeah.
us a lot of money, but anyway. But it's very interesting, the hospital bed end of our business, as well as the funeral care or death care end of our
Very
business.
large company right there in Batesville, Indiana, and that's I believe it's two publicly traded companies, Hill
Correct.
Rom and Batesville Casket Company. Now, Batesville does more than just caskets, right?
As far as, well, we do basically anything dealing with the funeral industry.
Anything in the industry, right?
From, memorial urns to urn vaults to handling materials that a customer could use with grief materials, brochures. We work with several grief counselors dealing with families, or helping funeral directors who want to deal with that grieving end of the business to help
Right.
their client families face the reality of death and help them cope with their loss. Afterwards, a lot of funeral homes have a post care,
Right, right.
service
Aftercare.
aftercare. And we, of course, there are a lot of companies that do, that will assist funeral directors, not just us, but
Oh, yeah.
we feel that's an important part of funeral
Oh,
service.
very definitely. And the great thing is now, so oftentimes funeral homes are having a lot of that information on their websites. I was recently at goldfinch.com, the website for all of their properties, and they've got a lot of tremendous information on their downloadable forms and otherwise, cremation forms, Veterans Administration forms, but also that aftercare process. And great operators, same thing with McMillan Small in Myrtle Beach, Lee Funeral Home and Crematory. I think we talked about Shannon Graves here, whose family is in the McKenzie. A lot of funeral homes have websites. Watson,
Conway
exactly.
Funeral Service there.
I don't mean to leave any out. I saw that Ruse Mortuary and recently has hired a new.
Ms. Latimer, Ms. Edna Latimer.
I hate to even begin mentioning any because
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll leave a bunch
it's
out.
easy to
Probably
leave.
some of your clients. I
Yeah.
got to be careful. But these websites have a lot of great information on them, oftentimes that are very important. They highlight the aftercare as well as the pre-planning process. For the operators you're dealing with, a lot of them are just trying to make sure that folks recognize, much like the life insurance business, you don't want to think about it, but you need to think about it.
Yeah, a lot of funeral homes have really got some pretty enhanced websites to where families can go online and sign a register book or send an acknowledgement card. They can even order flowers.
Yeah.
Get directions if they're from out of town. It's just a lot of good services that funeral professionals provide.
Oh, yeah.
For their clients.
Jim, how has the industry changed since you got in it? I don't want to say almost 40 years ago,
Yeah,
but I think you mentioned off camera in 1970.
Right.
Is that the year
I started?
that,
I was still teaching school, but working, kind of getting my feet wet in the industry, so to speak, in the deaf care industry. I can remember in 1970, the funeral home I was at, we had unit pricing as most funeral homes had.
Yeah.
And what unit pricing is, it's where the funeral director would group all their cost, their overhead, their embalming, their cost of the casket into one single unit price.
Right.
If you walked in and quite often you wouldn't really explain what that unit price entailed, because most people would want to get into a showroom or selection room and get out.
Right.
Being in a room full of caskets is not the most comfortable environment for people. And
even though that's what you're obviously moving, that's the product you move, but you recognize that.
Give you an example of how uncomfortable people. I remember getting on an elevator at a convention that had Batesville Casket Company, and these people were on there and they just said, "Caskets, ooh." I said, "No, it's gaskets." They said, "Oh, gaskets. Oh, okay." It's like it sends such a negative vibe to a lot of folks when you even mention the word. And a lot of it's psychologists saying. My brother was a clinical psychologist before he died. Psychologists say anything that we're not familiar with or don't know don't know about or are unsure of, we fear it.
We're fearful of.
And that's what death is. I mean, because we have our faith that promises
oftentimes
us,
guides people,
and it guides people,
but even then, still,
it's
there's
still
got to
tough
be,
because you don't know exactly 100%.
It is faith,
for sure.
Right.
And so people are fearful of anything they're not comfortable with or unsure of.
Yeah.
And a casket obviously reminds someone of, of our ensuing demise. When no one lives forever.
Right.
And that's so you can understand how people feel. I didn't think about it because when we were young, and I was very young back then. We don't even think about death, so caskets didn't even bother me.
Right.
It's just when you get a little bit older and you realize, we don't live forever, even though 18 and 20-year-olds think they do.
Right.
Then that's, it can be a very uncomfortable environment.
And being the father of 3 daughters who span those ages in the early 20s to the early 30s, I guess, around that same, not to date you there again, Jim, but ultimately you have to say, girls, y'all need to think about this as well. Mm-hmm. You're young, but you need to think about it. You don't need to worry about it. You don't need to spend a lot of time thinking about it, but you need to recognize it.
But your question earlier about how has it changed, basically everything was unit priced.
Right.
And then what happened was our industry, there was a Jessica Medford that wrote a book about the death care industry, and she really lambasted our industry because a lot of folks, they would go into a funeral home, and if they saw a $2,000 unit price on a casket, they would assume that $1,500 of it was profit.
Right.
When in actuality, it's nowhere near that.
Right.
So with the advent of the Federal Trade Commission, there was just like 3 years in the making of this, with a lot of people were brought into, I think Senator Grassley headed it up. But
right.
There were a lot of folks were brought in and testified about their experiences. Come to find out, our industry has one of the smallest amount of complaints based on the total amount of contacts that funeral professionals have with client families throughout the year. If you take the 2 million times and then equate that to the number of complaints, is one of the smallest of any industry.
That's tremendous.
But anyway, that's the federal government in their wisdom, of course, got involved in our industry and regulated it to the point that you have to make certain disclaimers to families. You have to use a certain format in your pricing.
Oh, yeah.
The Federal Trade Commission requires you to price your services separately. Tell your families what it actually costs you to put on a funeral.
Like a cafeteria plan, even for sure.
And then break it down and then price the casket separate from that.
Right.
And what it did, funeral homes didn't realize, but when we were under the unit price concept, about 25% of all funerals that were conducted at a loss. In other words, when you unit priced at $1,595 funeral, you didn't realize you were losing $400 or $500 because it wasn't covering your overhead. And you say, why is that? It's not really a problem, but it's just the nature of our industry.
Oh, yeah.
The average funeral home in the United States does approximately 70 traditional or 70 calls or contacts, or handles 70 loved ones' remains a year, and that's not very many business transactions to spread fixed cost out of it.
Jim, I hate to say it, we have run out of time, and we have got so many. Yeah, you're looking at me. This hadn't been 25 minutes, but yes, it has. I'm sorry to say. So many more questions we want to get into. We're going to have to get you back another time. Would you be willing to do that? That's great. Jim, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Absolutely. I appreciate the invite.
Stay tuned to more Carolina People with Jim Bowdre of Batesville Casket Company coming up next. You heard Jim talk about some of the cost in the industry, in the funeral home industry. How do people pay for those services? How do you go about? There's a lot of answers to that. We even think about the embalming process. What is it? It may sound very foreign, maybe something you don't want to hear about. Coming out of Jim Bowdre, I think you'd want to hear about it. Also, how has consolidation impacted the industry, and what's the future of the industry? We're going to have to get Jim Bowdre back another time to break those down. Hopefully, you got a lot out of the last 30 minutes. Jim Bowdre, making a difference every day.